Here's the happy conservative warrior, Mike Gallagher.
Throughout this entire Syria controversy, I've been thinking an awful lot of Ron Paul, former Republican congressman from Texas. He is the author of several books, and he is the father of a movement. You know, I'm one of the few radio hosts in America who continually have sort of scolded my broadcasting brethren who like to beat up on Ron Paul and his son, Senator Rand Paul from the state of Kentucky. Because millions and millions of Americans, particularly young people, appreciate what I call the Ron Paul movement. The strict adherence to the Constitution, the strict belief that we better never take military action unless it's in our national interests. And for many, many of us, Ron Paul and his message is being vindicated now more than ever. As Congress prepares to debate what we should do in Syria, I think a whole lot of people have a renewed appreciation for the message that Ron Paul has delivered for many, many years. It's a real honor to welcome back to the Mike Gallagher Show on our guest line, Dr. Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, how have you been, sir?
Doing well, Mike. Nice to be with you.
Well, thank you for taking some time. I know you've been real busy with your various ventures, and you're continuing to get your voice out there post-Congress. I wonder if you're sitting back and you're saying, see, I told you so. I've been telling you this all along. It sounds like a whole lot of Americans are starting to sound like Ron Paul.
Well, you know, I sense that the country is moving in that direction. I give a lot of other people credit, too, people like you who help spread the message. So there's a lot of people involved, but there is a movement going on. I don't even think it's just limited to the United States. I think that vote with the Parliament in England the other day was fantastic.
Sure.
But the politicians are one thing, and usually the people are apathetic and complacent. They don't care, and they go along, or they buy into the rhetoric. But maybe things are changing. Just think how long it's been since the people rebelled on a military vote in England, 1782. And the fact that Obama's been forced back into the Congress, I think, is encouraging. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but this move suggests that the people are speaking out. I frequently read, and I'm sure you've heard people say, I don't participate, I don't vote, my vote doesn't count, one person can't do anything. But a lot of voices speaking out together can have an effect. So if there truly is a movement, I have always claimed there has to be Republicans and Democrats and independents that changes attitudes and the atmosphere, whether it's on economic policy or foreign policy. Eventually, the politicians will listen. So let's hope the door is open now. Let's hope the American people speak out here in the next few days and see if we can push this vote in a direction. I think it would be historic if we could, defeat this plan to go in militarily, into Syria.
And I think it's very possible that that's precisely what's going to happen. It seems to me that what's happening with regards to the American people's response to military action in Syria is a total and thorough vindication of the Ron Paul message. That if this isn't in our national interest, why are we going to go over there? I mean, this is almost a textbook example of what you've said for decades. There are no good guys or bad guys in this. You don't know who the winners or the losers are in this. We're supposed to cozy up to rebels who are in cahoots with Al-Qaeda. I mean, this is what's so difficult for the American people to accept in terms of military action in Syria, right?
Right, and I think what's happening, whether it's economic or the foreign policy, the failures are becoming more apparent. We can spread this message more easily, through the Internet and the various other avenues, and the people, are making a better judgment call. So I think it's really fantastic. Also, a lot of people are saying, there's a limit. Even the military people now who are saying, this is going to require a supplemental. We don't have the money in the bank to take this on. It's going to be billions of dollars, and it's always more than it costs. But just think of moving the ships around. Each Tomahawk could be $1 million or more, and that is really expensive. That's always a drain on the economy. People are starting to wake up to this.
All right. So what do you say to people who condemn your message and don't like you very much because they complain that you are just an isolationist? What do you say to that isolationist argument that I know you've received for many years?
Yeah, well, the word is meant to be a pejorative and make it sound nasty and that you're evil and that you don't care about people. But the whole thing is, it means that we're non-interventionist. Doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves. Isolationism, economically and militarily, is when you just wall off your borders and you don't trade with people. People who call me an isolationist are the ones who put on sanctions. They're the ones who have sanctions on Cuba. I want to trade with Cuba and talk to Cuba, the people. In the same way around the world, they're the ones who want to punish and sanctions, internationalism, and about the only thing that you can concede is, yes, I would like to make sure our weapons aren't placed overseas, just antagonizing and provoking and using weapons to kill people, and they turn that around and make it sound terrible. But I like trading, I like traveling, I like friendship, and this is not something brand new. This is actually some very strong advice the founders gave us, even though even in our early history they didn't tend to always want to follow that. But it's great advice, and if you look to the Constitution, there's no authority for us to pretend that we can take care of all the problems of the world. And I guess because the events are getting so bad, people are starting to wake up.
Sure.
And say, well, maybe something different, especially young people saying that it looks like we need something different.
Well, I want to tap into that for a moment. Ron Paul is with us here on our guest line on the Mike Gallagher Show. Toll-free number is 800-655-MIKE. It's always good to welcome the former Texas congressman back to the show. I have watched with great admiration many young people drawn to your message. These are the people who are going to be the future of the country, who are going to be voters and continue to vote in elections. And yet there are a lot of my colleagues who just have utter disdain for anything that comes out of your mouth, it seems. It almost feels personal. Have you noticed that? And if so, what do you attribute that to? Why wouldn't conservative writers and pundits and broadcasters and columnists, why wouldn't they be impressed? Because let's face it, Congressman, you're not exactly what one would think would be necessarily appealing to a 19-year-old kid. I mean, you're a wise senior. I mean, you're a guy who's been around a long time, but you're not frilly, or you're not full of style. It's more substance, and yet young people are drawn to your message. One would think Republicans would appreciate what Ron Paul, and by extension, I think your son Rand, have contributed to the party, and yet many of them just have nothing but contempt for you. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the older people get, the less likely they are to look at different things, and they're locked in, and They don't want to change. They want to just stay the same. A lot of them are dependent on the system. They might be in the military-industrial complex, and they might be looking for free medical care, and it's on, and they always have this special benefit. Young people are more open-minded. They like the whole spirit of liberty, making your own mind. And one thing that has really impressed me is when I talk to the young people, they'll come up and they say, well, you changed my life. I say, how can I change your life? What did I do? And for some reason, they say, well, I felt like I had to do something about my life and act more responsibly. They develop a sense of needing to be self-reliant, which is amazing to me. They'll go back to school and they'll study, and the guy says, I just went to medical school. I never dreamed I would do this. These kind of things that go on, I think it's really fantastic. But it's also the fact that young people have their eyes a little more open as they leave college. They're a little bit more honest with themselves about, spending all the money, having all this debt, not being able to get jobs, knowing what the government owes, and seeing the failures. And instinctively, I think all people are instinctively against war, but then they get brainwashed. But young people, since they're bearing the burden, it's more difficult to brainwash them into thinking that, oh yes, to be a good American, I got to go marching off to foreign countries and kill people and drop bombs. And we have to give a lot of credit to what's going on with communications now, that people can see and hear this. At the same time, I give a lot of credit right now for confirmation, from our whistleblowers that are saying, yeah, this is what our government really thinks about us, and this is what our government is doing to us. But let me mention one more thing, though, that they tell me. I said, why is this message appealing, or why do you even pay attention? They would say, well, when they referred to the debates, they said, well, you're the only one that was telling the truth. Wow. And I think they sense that I'm working very hard to be as straightforward as possible.
Let's talk about a couple of your former Republican colleagues over on the Senate side. Lindsey Graham, John McCain, sort of leading the charge. Obviously, the headlines read they're warm to military action in Syria. I think they've been red hot on the idea for a long time. What do you make of Republicans who seem to be comfortable with supporting President Obama's desire to have some kind of military intervention in Syria?
Well, that's been the Republican position for a long time. Even though Democrats got us into Vietnam, it was the Republicans that wanted to fight and expand it, and were disgusted because we finally quit all the killing. So that is a position that's held, and I tried to make the point that that has not always been the case. That Republicans have had, a position different, that didn't think we should be going to these wars. But McCain and Graham, they are a real detriment, because the only criticism they have of the president, they didn't do it sooner, and they don't do it more broadly. They're ready to march into Tehran, and they're just almost obsessed with this, and think that military action can solve any problem in the world. And I'm hoping they're losing this fight, because I think it's an intellectual fight, it's a philosophic fight, and I think the views are shifting, and the people are starting to shift their views, and we're right in the middle of this transition. So let's hope in the next week we get some more good news.
Do you have a prediction? How do you think this is going to play out in Congress?
I'm afraid it'll pass. They're going to water it down, and they'll pretend it was just very limited. And it won't be, the way it's originally written means that they could march on Iran right now. So they'll water it down and say, oh, this is just sort of like this, and then narrowly pass it. I don't know. I mean, I'm really hoping the American people are more awake than that. If they send a message and say, we've had it, don't vote for this, who knows? There may be a fantastic victory. Let's do a friendly gentleman's bet, because I'm going to bet that the American people are going to prevail. Congress is going to say no. It's going to be a stunning defeat for Barack Obama. Bet you a steak dinner. What do you think? Are you on? I'll be glad to do that. I might not show up, but I'll send you the money. Very pleased.
I'll have you put it into our foundation to help the families of police officers killed in the line of duty, Gallagher's Army.
Wonderful. That's hope and pray.
Great having you on the program, Dr. Paul. Keep fighting the good fight. We need your voice now more than ever. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you joining us. Ron Paul here on the Mike Gallagher Show. Your reaction coming up. What do you think about what he had to say? 1-800-655-MIKE. Is he right? You think he sounds a little bit pessimistic as to whether or not Congress will prevail against intervening militarily in Syria? I think he's overly pessimistic. I think Congress is going to say no, a big fat no. What about you? 1-800-655-MIKE. Join us.